The assignment. What if the most real love you've ever felt was built on a lie? What if the woman who finally made you smile again, the one who held your face in her hands and told you it wasn't your fault, the one who made you believe you were worthy of being chosen, was hired to do it? This is the story of Julian Kingsley, a man so guarded, so completely armored by grief and silence, that his own mother paid a stranger to crack him open. And it worked. The problem? The stranger fell, too. Stay with me. Because this story doesn't go where you think it's going. And by the end of part 3, I promise, you won't be the same person who pressed play. Julian Kingsley, 35 years old. Brilliant. Wealthy. Utterly, devastatingly alone. He built a tech empire from nothing. He donates anonymously to children's charities. He reads philosophy before bed and runs the same route through Central Park every single morning at exactly 6 a.m. He is disciplined, quiet, kind in ways he never advertises. And he hasn't truly smiled in years. Helena Adams, late 20s. Sharp-minded. Foster system survivor. She reads people the way others read books, with precision, with hunger, with the practiced calm of someone who learned early that survival depends on adaptation. She has never failed an assignment. Until now. The office had no sign on the door. No brass plaque. No street-level windows. Just the number 312 on the 3rd floor of an unremarkable building. And inside, a secret that would change 2 lives forever. Helena sat across from Evelyn Kingsley, a woman who radiated wealth like perfume. Designer suit. Flawless makeup. And hands that trembled, just slightly, as she placed a photograph on the desk between them. This is my son, Julian. Helena studied the image. Dark hair. Dark eyes that held something guarded. Handsome in that quiet way that suggested he didn't particularly care whether anyone noticed. He stood alone at what appeared to be a corporate gala, surrounded by people, yet completely, achingly separate from all of them. He's 35, Evelyn said, her voice catching at the edges. He works 18-hour days. He hasn't brought anyone home in years. He hasn't smiled, really smiled, in longer than I can remember. Helena kept her expression neutral. This was her job. Compatibility connections didn't just match couples. They manufactured chemistry, engineered connection, created the appearance of love for clients who could afford to pay for it. What exactly are you hoping I can do, Mrs. Kingsley? The older woman's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. I want my son to remember what it feels like to want something besides work. I want him to open his heart again, even if it's just a crack. I'm not asking you to marry him, Miss Adams. I'm asking you to show him that he can still feel. Helena should have said no. She should have explained that this particular request crossed too many ethical lines. Should have stood up, shaken the woman's hand, and walked out. Instead, something in Evelyn's desperation resonated in a place Helena kept carefully locked. She knew what it was like to be alone. To build walls so high that no one could scale them. To forget, completely forget, what it felt like to let someone in. Tell me about him, Helena said. And so began the most dangerous assignment of her life. Over the next 2 weeks, Helena became an expert on Julian Kingsley with the precision of a surgeon. Morning runs, always the same route. Coffee from the corner shop on Madison at exactly 7:15. Dinner meetings that ran late. Home by 10 if he was lucky. She studied every interview he'd ever given. Watched footage of his presentations. Learned that he valued intelligence over beauty, substance over style. That he loved classical music and small Italian vineyards and art galleries on rainy Sundays. That he read Dostoevsky and Camus. That he donated money to causes he believed in, always anonymously, never seeking credit. And she learned the one thing that would make her job both easier and infinitely more complicated. Julian Kingsley valued honesty above all else. That last detail made her stomach turn. On a Monday morning, Helena walked into the Madison Avenue coffee shop at 7:12 a.m. Simple jeans. Cream sweater. A worn copy of the Brothers Karamazov in her hands. No designer labels. Nothing that screamed effort. At 7:15 exactly, Julian walked through the door. She didn't look up. Didn't acknowledge him. Just turned a page and took a slow sip of her black coffee, perfectly, effortlessly absorbed. She felt rather than saw him notice her. He left. Didn't approach. Good. This was a long game. She came back the next morning. And the next. Different book each time, Crime and Punishment, then Camus, The Stranger. On the third morning, she felt his presence pause beside her table like the air itself had shifted. That's an interesting choice for morning reading. His voice was deeper than she'd expected. Warmer. Helena looked up, letting surprise cross her face, as if she hadn't orchestrated this exact moment down to the minute. I find Camus oddly comforting with coffee, she said. The absurdity of existence pairs well with caffeine. A smile ghosted across his lips. Small. Fleeting. But real. I've never thought of it that way. Most people haven't. He stood there a moment longer, coffee in hand. Then he extended his hand. Julian. Helena. Her hand slipped into his, warm, firm. The contact sent an electric current up her arm that she told herself was just good acting. It had to be acting. Stage 1 complete. Contact established. Interest sparked. The hook was set. But as she sat there, coffee cooling, she couldn't shake the memory of his almost smile. Or the way it made something in her chest feel dangerously close to hope. 3 weeks of careful orchestration. And Julian was falling exactly the way Helena had planned. She showed up at the coffee shop 4 mornings a week, never 5, never predictable. Always absorbed in a book he'd appreciate. Always leaving just before he could suggest they sit together. She wanted him curious. She wanted him chasing. On a Friday afternoon, she positioned herself in front of a Rothko painting at the gallery she knew he visited. 20 minutes. She stood there, genuinely moved by the layered colors, the violence hidden beneath so much beauty. She felt him before she heard him. You see it, too. His voice, quiet, almost reverent. See what? The violence beneath the beauty. The way he makes chaos look like peace. She glanced at him, and found him staring at the painting with an expression of such raw, unguarded longing that something in her chest cracked open. Is that what you see? Violence. Isn't that what we all are underneath? Chaos pretending to be order. Helena should have had a clever, flirty response. Instead, she heard herself say, maybe some of us are order pretending to be chaos. Maybe the violence is in the pretending. Julian studied her face like she was a painting he couldn't quite decode. That's a lonely way to live. You say that like you don't know exactly what I mean. His jaw tightened. A long pause. Then, that almost smile. Would you like to get coffee? Real coffee. This was it. The moment casual became intentional. I'd like that, Helena said. They talked for 2 hours in a quiet corner booth. Helena played her role with masterful precision, mirroring his body language, asking the questions that made him feel seen, revealing carefully curated truths about her past. The foster system. The consulting work. Her love of literature, art, philosophy, everything she'd researched he valued. She was perfect. And Julian was falling for it. She could see it in the way his shoulders slowly relaxed. The way his smiles came easier. The way he looked at her, like she was water and he had been dying of thirst. But something strange was happening to Helena. She was enjoying this. Not the conquest. Not the successful execution of her plan. Him. The way his eyes lit up when he talked about the algorithm his team had cracked. The way he listened, really listened, when she spoke. The way he was brilliant and lonely and trying so desperately not to show it. This was supposed to be a role. It was becoming something else entirely. 6 weeks in. A quiet Italian restaurant. Julian reached across the table, not bragging, not performing, just sharing. The software we're developing could revolutionize how rural communities access medical care. Telemedicine that actually works. That actually helps people who can't get to a hospital. Helena watched this man who pretended not to care about anything, pour every ounce of his passion into technology that would save lives. That's beautiful, Julian. He looked embarrassed. It's just business. No. She leaned forward, caught his hand. It's not. You're trying to make the world better. That's not just business. His fingers tightened around hers. Most people don't see it that way. Most people are idiots. He laughed. Actually, fully laughed, rich and surprised and completely unguarded. And Helena felt something inside her chest fracture, quietly, like ice beginning to crack. Then Julian looked at her, his thumb tracing slow circles on the back of her hand, and said words she wasn't prepared for. I haven't felt this way in a very long time. What way? Like maybe I'm not as alone as I thought. And then he told her about Sarah. 10 years ago, Julian had been in love. Really in love. They were engaged. On their way to look at wedding venues when a drunk driver ran a red light. He was driving. He survived. She didn't. I couldn't save her, Julian said, his voice flat and hollow, the only way he could say it without breaking completely. She was right there, and I couldn't do anything. Helena moved to his side of the booth without thinking. She took his face in her hands. It wasn't your fault. Grief doesn't require blame, Julian. It just requires time. How do you know that? Because I've spent my whole life blaming myself for things I couldn't control. For being abandoned. For never being chosen. The truth spilled out before she could stop it. But eventually I had to accept, some things just are. Some pain doesn't have a purpose. It just is. Julian's hands came up to cover hers, and he looked at her like she had just handed him something he'd been searching for across a decade. You were chosen, Helena. And then he kissed her. Soft. Tentative. Achingly sweet. And in that moment, with his pain tangling with her own, with his lips on hers and the whole careful architecture of her lie trembling, Helena felt something inside her completely shatter. This wasn't part of the plan. This was real. I haven't let anyone in since Sarah, he whispered, his forehead resting against hers. All I ever found were women who wanted what I had, not who I was. But you see the real me. With you, I don't feel alone anymore. His words were knives. Each one cutting deeper than the last. Because he was wrong. She had manufactured this. Every meeting, every question, every perfectly timed revelation, all of it engineered. She was exactly like the women he feared. Worse. Because at least they'd been honest about their motives. You're always honest, Julian murmured against her hair. I love that about you. The words landed on her skin like acid. That night, alone in her apartment, Helena picked up her phone and stared at Evelyn Kingsley's number. She should call. Should confess. Should return the money and walk away before the damage became irreparable. But her finger hovered, unable to press the name. Because walking away meant never seeing Julian again. Never hearing his laugh. Never being the person he believed her to be. The person she was desperately, terrifyingly starting to become. She set the phone down. Tomorrow. I'll figure it out tomorrow. But the thing about tomorrow is, it always arrives. And it always brings the truth with it. 2 months became 3. And Helena Adams, the woman paid to make a lonely man feel something, had made the one mistake no professional in her line of work could afford. She had fallen in love for real. Julian introduced her to his world, piece by careful piece. His favorite bookstore. The jazz club where he went to think. His grandmother, Rose, 93 years old, sharp as a blade, and terrifying in the best possible way. So you're the one who put the light back in my grandson's eyes, Rose said at the door, sweeping her gaze over Helena like a surgeon assessing a patient. Come in. Let me look at you properly. Lunch was intimate and relentless. Rose asked questions that seemed casual but weren't. And something extraordinary happened. The old woman stopped interrogating and started seeing. You've been hurt, Rose said suddenly. Someone taught you that love is dangerous. Helena's breath caught. I can see it in your eyes. That weariness. That wall. Rose's gaze softened. But you're here anyway. That takes courage. Then she leaned across the table and covered Helena's hand with her own, paper-thin skin, tremendous warmth. Do you love him? It wasn't a question. Yes, Helena whispered. Then don't waste it. Love is terrifying and messy, and it often hurts like hell. But it is the only thing that makes any of this worthwhile. That evening, walking through Rose's garden with Julian's arm around her, Helena made her decision. She would tell him the truth. All of it. Not because it was safe. Not because it would save her. But because he deserved to know who he had fallen in love with. Deserved to choose, with all the information, whether any of this could survive. She would go to his apartment in the morning. She would confess everything. That night, Julian called. I couldn't sleep without hearing your voice, he said softly. Helena, you're it for me. I don't know how I got this lucky. But I'm not letting you go. Julian, there's something I need to tell you. Tomorrow. Whatever it is, tell me tomorrow. Tonight, I just want to fall asleep thinking about how lucky I am. Okay, she whispered. Tomorrow. She arrived at his building at 9 a.m. with shaking hands and rehearsed words and a heart full of dread. The doorman smiled. His home. 23rd floor. She knocked. No answer. Tried the handle. Unlocked, unusual for Julian, who was meticulous about security. She stepped inside. The apartment was still. Too still. She found him in his study, chair turned to the window. Whiskey glass in hand. Bottle half empty. Hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. And eyes that were red-rimmed, swollen, destroyed. When were you going to tell me? His voice was flat. Emotionless. Somehow worse than shouting. Tell you what? Don't. The words snapped through the room like a gunshot. Don't lie to me. Not now. Not after everything. His mother had come that morning. Evelyn, overcome with guilt, unable to watch her son fall deeper into something she had engineered, had confessed everything. The hiring. The research. The choreographed meetings. The carefully constructed version of a woman Julian would love. She told me everything, Helena. How you researched me like a case study. How you became exactly the woman I would fall for. He stood and turned to face her, and the devastation in his expression made her want to disappear. Explain how you listened to me talk about Sarah. About how I'd been hurt by women who only wanted my money. And you were doing the exact same thing. It's not like that. Then what is it like? His voice dropped to barely a whisper. Tell me, Helena. What was I? A project? A challenge? It started that way, she said, tears streaming. But Julian, that's not what it became. I fell in love with you. Really fell in love. When? The question was a knife. After you'd already learned everything about me. After you'd orchestrated our entire relationship. How do I know any of it was real? The kiss, she said desperately. That first kiss in the restaurant, that was real. Everything after that was real. Was it? Or was that part of the performance? She reached for him. He stepped back. I know I was wrong, she said. I know I should have told you sooner. But what I feel for you, I swear to you, it is real. For one unbearable moment, she watched him want to believe her. Watched hope and devastation war across his face. Then he turned away. Get out. Julian. Get out, Helena. He moved to the window, his back to her. I can't look at you right now. Please don't do this. There's nothing to explain. He turned, and the coldness in his eyes made her stagger. You were hired to make me fall in love. Congratulations. You succeeded. Now leave. She tried one last time, moved to embrace him, to make him feel what she felt. He caught her wrists. Held her at arm's length. And when he spoke, it was quiet. Final. Devastating. Underscore 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 underscore. Leave now. Before I say something we'll both regret. Helena walked out of his study, out of his apartment, into an elevator that felt like a coffin. She made it to the street before her legs gave out. She collapsed onto a bench and sobbed until she couldn't breathe. Until passers-by gave her concerned looks. Until she had nothing left. She had known this ending was inevitable from the moment she took Evelyn's money. But knowing and living through it were entirely different things. The first week was survival. She quit her job. Refused Evelyn's tearful calls. Blocked every number connected to her old life. Found a studio apartment in a neighborhood that didn't ask questions. Took a night shift at a 24-hour diner called Mel's, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 6 nights a week. Night shifts meant she didn't have to see the sun. Didn't have to pretend to be okay when daylight exposed all her cracks. She worked. That's all she did. But late at night, when the diner was nearly empty and her mind had nothing to do but wander, she'd remember. The way his eyes lit up when he talked about his work. The way his voice sounded saying I love you for the first time. The way he'd looked at her in his study. Broken. Betrayed. Destroyed. Those memories hurt worse than anything she'd ever survived. Week 3. A regular customer, an older man who stirred too much sugar into his coffee, looked at her across the counter. Boyfriend trouble. Something like that, Helena said. He an idiot. No. The word came out fierce. I'm the idiot. I broke something I can't fix. The man nodded. Most things can be fixed, if you're brave enough to try. Helena stared at him. She thought of Rose. Love is terrifying and messy and it often hurts like hell. But it's the only thing that makes any of this worthwhile. She thought of Julian. You see me, the real me. With you, I don't feel alone. She thought of herself, the girl from foster care who'd learned that love was a performance, that survival meant adaptation, that no one ever chose you for yourself. But Julian had chosen her. And she had chosen him, too. At some point that she couldn't precisely name, she had stopped performing and started being. Started being someone she actually wanted to be. That person, the real Helena, the one who existed underneath every role she'd ever played, she was worth fighting for. So was he. She didn't call. Didn't text. She wrote him a letter, 12 handwritten pages that took her 4 nights to complete. She wrote every truth she'd ever held back. About who she was before the assignment. About who she became because of him. About the exact moment she realized the performance had ended and something real had begun. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't promise it would be easy. She only told him the truth, all of it, and let him decide. She slipped it under his door on a Thursday morning. Then she went back to her diner, her night shifts, her quiet little life. She waited. For 3 weeks, she heard nothing. And then, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, at a coffee shop on a street she'd never planned to visit, she looked up from her book. Julian Kingsley stood in the doorway. He looked thinner. Tired. Like 3 weeks of sleeplessness had carved new hollows into his face. He looked at her across the room for a long, unreadable moment. Then he walked over. Sat down across from her. Said nothing. Helena didn't speak either. Finally, quietly, he reached across the table and set something down between them. Her letter. Every page worn soft at the edges, like it had been read many, many times. You stopped performing, he said. Not a question. Yes. When? The art gallery, she said. When you looked at that painting like it was the most honest thing you'd ever seen. I looked at you, and I forgot my lines. Something moved across his face. Complex, guarded, searching. Rose told me I'd be an idiot to let you go, he said at last. Helena's throat tightened. She might be right. She's never wrong. His jaw worked. I'm not saying I'm not still angry. I'm not saying this is easy. But Helena, he stopped. Started again. The woman in these pages, the real you, I fell in love with her before I even knew she existed. Tears blurred her vision. I'm not asking you to trust me, she whispered. I'm only asking for the chance to earn it. Julian reached across the table and took her hand. Then let's start there, he said. From the truth. From the beginning. It wasn't a happy ending wrapped in ribbons. It was something better, something real. Two broken, wary, complicated people choosing each other anyway. Choosing to begin again with honesty instead of performance, with scars instead of armor, with the terrifying, courageous belief that love, even imperfect love, even love born in deception, could be rebuilt into something true. And sometimes, that is enough. Sometimes, that is everything. Person with praying hands, thank you for watching. This story was for you. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something you weren't expecting to feel today, that was the point. Because this isn't just Julian and Helena's story. It's the story of every person who has ever built walls and forgotten the door. Every person who has ever been so afraid of being truly seen that they hid behind a version of themselves that felt safe. You are not a performance. You are not the role you learned to play to survive. And love, real love, is not something you earn by being perfect. It is something you stumble into by finally being honest. White down pointing backhand index, drop a red heart hash in the comments if this story touched your heart. Tell us, which moment hit you the hardest? Subscribe to our channel. We release new emotionally charged stories every week. Stories about love, courage, loss, and the impossible beauty of the human heart. And don't forget to hit the bell notification bell so you never miss a story. We'll see you next time. Electric light bulb short life lesson from this story. The most dangerous thing you can do is show someone a version of yourself you think they'll love, and never let them meet the real you. Helena had perfected the art of becoming whoever the world needed her to be. But the moment she fell in love, that armor became her prison. Because you cannot be truly loved for who you are if you never let anyone see who you are. Julian's lesson was different but equally profound. Grief is not guilt. He carried the weight of an accident for a decade, punishing himself with isolation, refusing to let anyone close, because somewhere deep inside, he believed he didn't deserve to be happy. Together, they teach us this. Honesty is the only foundation love can actually stand on. Forgiveness is not weakness, it is the bravest thing a broken heart can do. And starting over, choosing truth over comfort, connection over protection, that is not failure. That is courage. Love someone real. Be someone real. The rest will follow.